everybody, welcome back to SportsKhabri to discuss the wrestlers matter better, to understand what has been happening with the remaining federations of India and what all options the athletes of our country have when it comes to addressing cases such as sexual harassment. We have with us today Mr. Nilanjan Datta and Mr. Rahul Mehra. Nilanjan Datta has worked with the AFF in the past. He has worked in the sports industry in various roles. Rahul Mehra is a prominent sports lawyer and an activist who's been fighting for the rights of sports athletes and how the federation should be functioning since many years now. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. Rahul, I'll straight away come to you with my first question, which is that in an ideal situation, if an athlete faces harassment at work, what are the protocols in place that one has to follow?
Subject to correction, to my limited knowledge, and I've been working in this space for almost 22 years now, and I'm a lawyer with a standing of about 23 years. So I've spent almost all my time dealing with sports and sports bodies ever since I've been a lawyer. With that limited knowledge of mine, I would say that there's no system at all. There is absolutely nothing within the sporting federations which at least deals with the protection of women athletes, and that also we include now children because there are minor athletes as well. From sexual harassment at the workplace, which could be their training grounds, which could be the federation itself, their offices, and the works. So there is absolutely no mechanism. There is absolutely no system. There is absolutely no forum before which the victim can actually go and approach. There are no counselors. There is no hand holding. There is no protection. In fact, everything is pitched up against the victim. So there is going to be pressure which is going to come from the bosses. There are going to be numerous kind of hurdles in the form of selection processes. They're going to be told that why you damaging your career, you have a complete career ahead of you, what are you doing, concentrate on the game. These things happen everywhere in society, just brush it under the carpet. And the system actually works against the athlete in every which way, whether be it sexual harassment or anything else. So therefore, I think unfortunately, we have a rotten system. uh, Unfortunately, we need to just we can't really deal with this rotten system. You can't in a way fine tune it, and therefore what needs to be done is it needs to be uprooted. It needs to be completely overhauled, and that's been the fight over the last at least 12 years of mine, through a couple of public interest litigations which I've filed in my own name. And thankfully, I would say, well, there have been frustrating times and there have been depressing moments. It's been challenging as a journey, but it's been very satisfying to the extent that slowly but surely, gradually, the entire the legal institutions, the judges, over the last 12 years have now realized, because of my various arguments and amendments and petitions and applications which have gone to the court, that this is a rotten system. This is a system where it's pitched against the athlete, and therefore it needs to be set right. And the recent judgment of 16th of August 22 in my PIL actually says it with a very heavy heart, but it's extremely hard hitting judgment. So all in all, I would say, to begin with, there is no system.
Nilanjan, there are many variables involved in our sports industry. There are, of course, the federations, there's the IOA, there's the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. In a system such as this, how does each party involved take responsibility of what is happening, and what are their roles? How do we make sure that there are no interferences? How do we make sure that we do not do anything that the bigger organizations, like for instance, like we have faced a FIFA ban in the past, so we have to also make sure that we adhere to the norms set up by the global organizations. So can you throw some light on the individual responsibilities that come to play in situations such as this?
Well, everyone is affiliated to the other. If you speak about NSFs, they are affiliated to the Indian Olympic Association, IOA, who in turn are kind of affiliated to the respective confederations and then the world body pertaining to that sport. Obviously, the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports helps and looks after everything. But this is moral responsibility. This case is an entirely sensitive issue. It's a moral responsibility which needs to be claimed, and it depends on the individual, the upbringing, the education level. No individual with a balanced thought process will ever be able to kind of support this kind of crime, where allegations are coming in. Mr. Mehra very rightly means he says about the rotten system. It's not just the sporting federations; it's the entire sociological context. Sports is always into the directly connected with the sociological context over the decades, over the ages, over the centuries. And in a society like India, this harassment cases have been there in each and every establishment. Means let's not go deep into it. So it's not just the NSFs where the allegations are coming from. It pertains all over, and everyone's there involved, being involved at one time or the other. From the sociological context, and being a sports journalist, what pains and hurts and the alarming situation is that India are on the threshold of making that slow progress towards that dream of becoming a sporting nation. Here we are dealing with the sports which has given us how many Olympic medals? Seven, eight. I'm not good in stats. Maybe six or seven. I guess seven or eight, whatever it is. And the Olympians are there. Olympic medalists are there, sitting on the streets, and still we are dealing with a sexual harassment case, allegations, and India is still a society where girls find it hard to be coming out into sports. Now, me fathering a 17-year-old daughter, I'd be having second. No, she's no more into sports. Someone who has an aspiration, the parents and the kid, to be coming out into sports. If this is the example they are looking at, okay, this is not in the mohalla, this is not in the district associations, this is not even in the state where you are living at, but these are world champions, Olympic champions on the streets. Justice still, it's not being heard. I'm not speaking about justice because learned lawyer Mr. Mehra would be able to speak better much about that. We just blabber around the bush whenever justice and law is concerned. I'm not an expert at that. But if it's not heard at all, there would be doubts and serious doubts in the minds of each and every parent from the sociological context, pushing their kids, or especially the girls, into the sport. So the dream of the wrestlers or shuttlers, where the women's sports are coming up, leading us into the Olympics and the Asian Games podium and the CWG podium, garnering us glory, that will obviously hit quite a big roadblock from the sociological context, is what I fear, and that's bound to happen.
Uh, Rahul, right now, we have all been talking about the wrestlers case. Can you explain it to us in easier terms that where did exactly we go wrong? Uh, the wrestlers, of course, they did try to go through the formal channels, but they were let down. That is why they decided to hit the streets and they decided to go ahead with the protest again. So, can you throw some light on how things could have been better and where did we go wrong?
See, the first and foremost, there is a law in the country. It's not a codified law in the sense there is no. It's not a statute passed by the government of the day, but there is a something called the National Sports Development Code of India, which came in 2011. Prior to that, there were these loose guidelines which were there, and the different government orders, which used to govern the space. Uh, Now, in 2011, when this came up, a precursor to that was in 2010. In my own PIL in the CWG, they had challenged because for the first time I had raised an issue on age and tenure restrictions of all the office bearers. And I had stated that in 1975, this was supposed to be implemented. In 2001, there was a sports minister, Ms. Uma Bharti, who had stayed this guidelines. And now in 2009-10, I want, prior to the Commonwealth Games, that these guidelines should be at least implemented. Why is there a stay on it? The court asked the government, and the government was forced to lift the stay. So there was an abeyance. It was put in abeyance, and they lifted that stay. And on 1st of May 2010, a long-standing demand which was there from the citizenry was eventually implemented through court order. saying that there has to be a restricted tenure and a restricted age. Age being 70, tenures being maximum 3 tenures of 4 years each. Now, when that happened, at that point in time, there was a lot of resistance. Various federations, including the IOA, just a sec. Various federations, including the IOA, challenged it in the High Court. In my case, and a separate challenge came up subsequently in 2011, where they challenged the code. In 2014, Delhi High Court, through its division bench, decided that and held, it was a landmark judgment, saying that the code, till the time a legislation is brought by the central government, will apply, will hold the field in the as far as sports domain is concerned. So therefore, sports code till date, because there is no law which has come in, a sports law, till date, that holds the field. Now, if this be the background, therefore, the law, as far as sports federations, IOA, NSFs, the ministry, and any other stakeholder who is dealing with sports in the country has to follow that law of the land, right? We are a democracy. There's a rule of law which prevails in our country. We are not anarchists. We are not people who it's not a dictatorship. Hopefully, we are in a democracy where rule of law prevails, right? Uh, Now, if this is the bedrock of our understanding, then there is a document in the sports code at page 86, and I have it right in front of me. It says the following, and I'll read it out for you. It's dated 12th of August 2010, specifically deals with prevention of sexual harassment of women in sport. Please mark the date, 12th of August 2010. We are in 2023, right? 13 years down the line. And that's where the problem is. The ministry is in cohorts with all these national sports federations. The ministry actually does not implement its own law and its own code. The ministry is hand in glove. It's complicit with the federation bosses. It sees the face, it sees the political affiliation, and then it shows the rule book. If I am from the ruling party, I will be let off. If I am from an opposition party, the law will be enforced on me. Unfortunately, that's what's happened under Congress tenure, and it continues under the BJP tenure. Nothing has changed, right? So all of them are the same. They all the famous saying in sporting arena is "Hamam mein sab nange hain," right? They're all the same. They all are complicit and they have a vested interest. Now, what is the vested interest? The vested interest is to somehow man these bodies through our own people. Why? We can have a separate show on it, right? But the vested interest is seek control of these bodies, and it continues even under the current government, and in a very brazen manner. Now, when you had this 12th of August 2010 document, and should I just read a few provisions of this? It's a two-page document. It says that there is a Vishakha judgment which has recently come in 1990. I mean, for 2010, we are talking about 1997. And therefore, this should be implemented. All national sports federations, including IOA, must immediately bring their rules and guidelines in conformance with this Supreme Court judgment, where the guidelines have been given. Because till then, there was no act for prevention of children from sexual harassment, right? Or otherwise, the prevention of women at workspace, right? There was no POSH. That act didn't exist. It came later in 2013-14. Now, para 5 of this document says the following, while following these guidelines, the NSF should necessarily take the following steps. The first and the foremost, notify, publish, circulate, in express terms, prohibition of sexual harassment. Number two, include the rules and guidelines and regulations prohibiting sexual harassment in your rules and regulations of the federation. Number three, provide a conducive environment which is healthy and hygienic and otherwise for future to ensure that there is no hostile environment for the victim. Number four, allow them to raise these issues at an appropriate forum. Number five, have a complaint mechanism. And what happens in that complaint mechanism, quote unquote, the NSF, so out here, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh as the president, the NSF or the executive committee of WFI, whatever you may want to call it, should set up a complaint mechanism for redressal of complaint by the victim. Such complaint mechanism should ensure a time-bound treatment of complaint. Did we have a complaint mechanism? Did we have a internal complaints committee? Did we have that internal complaints committee which should be at least not only chaired by a woman, but two-thirds of that committee should be comprising of women. Did we have a time-bounded inquiry into these allegations? So nothing of the sort. That's why I said there's no system in this country in sports. Then just a couple of more provisions. Disciplinary action to be taken against those where such conduct amounts to misconduct. This is gross misconduct. As a president, you've done all this. You had a fiduciary relationship with your athlete. If this is not gross misconduct, what else is? Where is that disciplinary action against Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh? He should have been thrown out of this body long back. Then criminal proceedings. Now look at this. Everything is there. Unfortunately, it's gone to the winds. Criminal proceedings, where such conduct amounts to specific offense. Now, this is a prevention of children from sexual harassment. There's a special act and a special provision provided, very heinous offenses, for which they are saying wherever there is a specific offense under the Indian Penal Code or under any other special law, which is for the children, right? The NSF. So again, the executive committee of WFI or the president of WFI shall initiate appropriate action, which is what? Lodging a criminal complaint, getting an FIR registered. It was the bounden duty under the provisions of the sports code of the executive committee to stand up against its president, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, and lodge a criminal complaint on behalf of these 7 complainants who are the victims as girls. Did they do that? And then PT Usha comes out, shame on her. She comes out and says that I'm embarrassed because of these people. You should be embarrassed that you are actually heading IOA and you are not joining the dharna with the athletes sitting out there. It's a shameful conduct on part of PT Usha. And in accordance with law, by making a complaint with the appropriate authority. Appropriate authority is the Delhi police in this case. In particular, it should ensure that the victims or witnesses are not victimized or discriminated against. Each one of them have a threat perception today. Supreme Court has to protect them. I mean, what are we talking about? Then the next para is complaints committee. The complaint mechanism should be adequate to provide where necessary complaints committee a special counselor or a support service including maintenance of confidentiality. The complaints committee should be headed by a woman and not less than half of its members should be women. You know, they say we have a complaints committee which is manned by the cronies of Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, and they have later on they added one woman in that, I think Sakshi Malik, and that they call a complaint committee. Can it ever be called a complaint committee? And the heading was Ethics Commission Complaint Committee for Sexual Harassment. So when they realize that people like me are raising this in the public forum, that they don't even have this document in place, they all of a sudden change the nomenclature of that committee from Ethics Commission to this. Now, where you don't even have a body, you don't have a mechanism, you don't have a way where people can redress, you don't have protection, you don't have confidentiality, you don't have a conducive environment, and then you come and blame people for it. The last para of this letter in the sports code, which is law, it's a violation of law. All NSFs are requested to take necessary action as per the above guidelines, latest by, and mark this date, 31st of August 2010, under intimation to this ministry. Now, nobody intimated to the ministry, right, that they have this provision. Why did the ministry not de-recognize or suspend all these bodies right there and then? They, in 2009, under the same sports code guidelines, they brought out a concept of annual recognition. In the annual recognition under Annexure 2 of the sports code, clearly says and provides that you should comply with the provisions of the sexual harassment prevention provisions and guidelines. There was a gross violation of these guidelines by every single federation, including IOA. What did the Government of India, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports do in 2010 when there was a Congress government? And what is the current government doing when there is a BJP government, which is why I say they're all the same. So it's not about the governments, it is the malaise, it is the approach, it is the attitude, it is the the privilege that we give to the member of parliaments and the MLAs of a political party. No matter which political party, all of them are the same in this. Each one of them is complicit, each one of them is to be blamed. That is why I say there should be self-governance. Politics completely de-link the governments of the day, be it at the state level or the national level. from the governance at the state level of sports federations or national level at the NSF level. Because see how they have now elected. It's actually a nomination. It's not even an election. It's an election under a nomination under the garb of election. When we say that PT Usha is the president of IOA, when we say Gagan Narang is in the executive committee of IOA, these are hand-picked individuals who have no spine of theirs. They are his master's voice, and they can't speak a word against the establishment. They are
Uh,
member.
uh,
One as a member of parliament, as the president of the IOA. You expect a member of parliament of BJP to question the powers that be? I mean, which world are we living in? Are we not living in the current India?
yeah. Rahul, I'll have to go to Nilanjan with my next question. Nilanjan, in a situation such as this, where can the IOC or the World Wrestling Federation play a role?
Well, it's an internal matter. Obviously, they can be looking into it and keeping a close eye on it, a bird's eye view. But all of a sudden, you cannot come out and interfere into the thing. It's not a doping scandal that's rocking the sport or the organizations. But yeah, obviously, it's kind of very alarming situation. Just a point with your permission with what Mr. Mehra very rightly mentioned. What the women's grievance cell, it's there may be. I believe that's a time to be looking into it, so that there's secrecy maintained, with not just representatives from within the organization, but there should be representation from all over the society, from the sociological context, getting into that women's grievance cell, obviously being headed by ladies, and a sizable percentage, three-fourths percent majority of the ladies. And we need to have lawyers out there. We need to have administrators out there. We can have retired officials out there. We need to have current athletes out there. There can be an email which can be made, which is directly sent to that committee, which is headed, so that uh, in case of any fear that's around in the mind of anyone, that won't arise at all. And it's all about the upbringing and the, what do you say, and depends from one individual to the other. It's the most heinous mindset that one can have, to be ever thinking of such act. But again, going back to the sociological context, the laws regarding such acts need to be exemplary in the country. We are still blabbering around. There's so many victims all over. Leave aside sports. When do they get justice? So, if we are not able as a society to be setting an exemplary punishment or an example to the individuals or the culprits, people will say, "Arey, they got scot free." It will only kind of, unless you have the law in the right manner, these things would just keep on happening. And for all of them who are around, it's very hard to digest that people do not understand that this is going on or this is happening. Come on, at least have the guts and the face to be coming up and saying, "Boss, this is not done, this is not wrong, this is wrong, absolutely wrong." And the grievance cell, what Mr. Mehra very rightly mentioned, it's being dealt by internal employees and other. There can be obviously people from outside the federation and the sporting body and the society getting into it. And let there be a kind of a secret, like a secret ballot. Let that be a kind of secret email or a cell where one can go and just address. Coming back to what you asked about the world body, obviously, as I said, it may be interference. They may be keeping a close tab on this, but they obviously expect the IO and the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, and the body of the Wrestling Federation of India to be taking care of it.
If I can just in a one sentence respond to that, we are expecting IOA and the ministry, with all due respect, to take action in this regard. They are the ones who are at fault. It's the IOA which doesn't have a similar mechanism for themselves. It's the ministry which has looked like an ostrich and dug its head in the sand for last 12, 13 years. And we expect them to stem the rot. We expect them to clean their house. Which is why in this country, unfortunately, everything has to go right to the Supreme Court. And then we blame judicial overreach and all that kind of nonsensical arguments in the society people take. What do you do in a society where the legislature, where the executive completely fails? What do you do in a society like that?
So,
Thankfully, there is still some semblance of hope in judiciary, right? People have.
Rahul, so
The day that goes, unfortunately, there will be a complete breakdown of democracy in our country.
Rahul,
Thankfully, there is that check and balance.
I'll ask the question that I'll ask you the same question. These are athletes who have won medals for us at world events. They're Olympic medalists, and even then the IOC cannot intervene.
But who cares? Do you think in this Indian society we care about athletes? We only care when we are once in a 4 year kind of a society, sporting society. Everybody will come. The entire India, right from Shah Rukh Khan to Amir Khan to Amitabh Bachchan to Sachin Tendulkar to Virat Kohli to Rohit Sharma to Dhoni to name the person, the Prime Minister, the Chief Ministers, they will open the cash boxes. Checks will be given, lakhs and crores will be thrown at these people at that point in time. They will try and take a kind of a 2 minutes out of that 15 minutes of fame, which is going to be there for themselves. Have these podiums, spend this extravagant money from the state and the national level on these athletes. Then they want to have a share of pie. They want to own them. Look here, they are there because of me. I did this for them. When you did nothing, your entire system was working against them. So that is the mindset of this country. We are today, we live on social media. Okay, today also, unless Abhinav Bindra and Neeraj Chopra, till the time both of them didn't come out, all these players were sitting in the wings, trying to feel, trying to portray that why should I get into their mess? I am having a cushiony, very nice, comfortable life with my endorsements, with the government thinking I'm on their side. Why should I pick up cudgels with the government of the day? Tomorrow I'll need money from them for my academy. I'll need their support for land. I'll need them to come and open my, inaugurate my various places. So it's a cozy club. Unfortunately, we are people with very very little integrity left in our society. There are sporadic cases of people who have spine, sporadic cases of people who have integrity, and which is what the problem is. There might be certain systems in place, but those systems are eventually going to be manned by whom? By people in the society, be it a judge, a retired judge who could be thoroughly corrupt, be it a retired lawyer who could be absolutely, hands in glove, hands in the till. So when we say that we should have lawyers, we should have judges, we should have bureaucrats, we should have people from civil society, NGOs, ultimately we should have people with character. We should have people who will actually walk the talk. We should have people who have a spine to stand up against the powers that be. How do you get those? Where do you get those from? You can't paradrop them. So therefore, the problem is that in our society, everything is about money. Everything is about fame. We want it's a quick fix solution we want. Today also, who's wanting to address the real malaise in WFI? Tell me that. Everything will be, the story will be in the back burners the moment these wrestlers get up from Jantar Mantar. And what is the malaise and what do you need to address? Can I just in 4 or 5 sentences tell you what the malaise is? The problem with every single federation, including the wrestling one, is that you don't have compliance of the law of the land, which is the sports code. Now, what does the sports code say? And it is a code which actually dates back to 1975. We are not willing in this country to comply to the laws of 1975, and we want to be the next Olympic champion and have the maximum golds and probably in 2036 have Olympics in India. So, I mean, which world? Complete disconnect. The politics of it is playing in its own realm, and the reality of sports of India is in its own era. And there is a complete disconnect between the two of them, 40 years, 50 years disconnect. Now, what needs to happen? There needs to be, right from the district to the state to the National Sports Federation, there needs to be one constitution, one thread which runs down in the pyramid. And what is that thread? There are 5, 7 things very critical which needs to be implemented by all of them, which is what the Delhi judgment now in my case, after all my arguments of years of my labor, has now culminated into, and Supreme Court thankfully hasn't diluted it. It has in fact blessed it. So therefore, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and probably very soon it will happen, with fingers crossed. So, number one, age and tenure to be applied right to the bottom, across the spectrum, not only president, secretary, treasurer. All executive body posts, everybody who has anything to do with Indian sports, age and tenure to be implemented right from top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid. One. So you take care of all the rotten elements who are eating the vitals of Indian sports with one sweeping stroke. You just throw them out. That's one. Two, now to infuse fresh blood, give them a democratic election. Give them a field which is independent, free, and fair. How do you do that? Deal with their electoral college. How can you deal with the electoral college? Again, in the judgment, it's there now. Minimum 25, and I don't subscribe to people because those are vested elements with vested interests. They're tom-tomming the talk and what the masters who are sitting at the top wants us to hear. That players are terrible administrators. So be it. They may be, but have we tested that in our country? If we haven't, it's time to test it. At least minimum code says minimum 25% eminent sports persons ought to be brought in a democratic manner in the General Assembly of every federation and also in the executive committee of every federation. So therefore, now we are at a stage in football, in IOA and various other challenges which have gone to the Supreme Court in my cases. I've won it in the High Courts and now everything is pending in the Supreme Court. Where there every single federation who has now come there, they are saying, why sports persons? We are doing a great job. So that means you feel threatened by sports persons, right? And if you feel, and if people of the kind that I've already mentioned, I need not give them adjectives anymore. If those kind of people feel threatened by somebody, it's surely the time has come for it to be tested. Maybe 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, we say it was a terrible experiment to have. Sports persons are actually terrible sports administrators, and therefore that chapter is now closed. But where is the empirical evidence for it? None whatsoever. Now, don't have puppet sports administrators in the name of eminent sports persons like P.T. Usha and Gagan Narang. Don't have them. Unfortunately, the problem is the government picks up and decides which will be an eminent sports person who will. At the back, they played beautifully. At the front, it seems like it's a democratic process. At the back, it's all manipulated process, which we have experienced recently in the IOA election. I'll give you a small classic example of how governments manipulate elections in sports. In this case, it was being monitored by Supreme Court, and then they were able to do this. Imagine that. And now it's in the Supreme Court. We'll see what comes out of it. They were able to. There is a concept which has been now coined as sports persons of merit. There were supposed to be 8 sports persons of merit who had to be brought in through electoral process from the Athlete Commission of IOA into the General Assembly of the IOA, so that sports persons have a say in the elections. Now, 40 or 41 or some 40 odd figure of people actually expressed their interest to contest elections for those 8 positions, right? Exactly the number of people who withdrew from elections, 32 out of the 40, so that exactly those 8 people who have been handpicked by the government, who are mouthpieces of the government, can actually then be brought in into the IOA as sports persons of merit. I'm not talking about such elections. I don't want such sports persons, in anything to do with the administration. Why is it that it is difficult for a person like Abhinav Bindra to even contest? Somebody who has a spine, and maybe Neeraj Chopra in times to come. He's shown his mettle on the ground. That's why I say gauge a sports person and call him a legend only when he's a legend on the field and off the field. We have a legend on the field who's a Bharat Ratna, but a terrible person off the field. He has not stood, his voice has never been raised for any of the issues. He's never withstood the pressures of the powers that be. He's always been with the establishment, the only Bharat Ratna of Indian sports. And look at Neeraj Chopra. He has a complete career ahead of him. Look at Abhinav Bindra. Doesn't give a damn to people and powers. These are the kind of people who need to come and who need to govern our sports. That's what. These are the sports persons of merit. These are outstanding individuals whom we want. Not puppets like P.T. Usha, who will tom-tom what the powers that be will say, that this is bringing disrepute to the country. Her one statement has brought the maximum disrepute to this country. Nothing else. So bring those kind of sports persons in. then there are mechanisms in which you need to actually play around, and there are various kind of reforms which have been, now there are 13 issues which have come down to, which have been enunciated in my petition. If all, and I'm telling you with all in a very humble way, with the greatest of responsibility at my command, if all of these are implemented in right earnest, without the government interfering in any of the processes, and the government ensuring that these reforms actually are kicked in and in the truest possible sense are implemented, mark my words, in 20 years, this country has so much of talent in sports, so much of hunger at the lowest level, that we will beat United States of America in 20 years. And we will be right at the top of the podium in Olympics as far as medal tallies go. That's the kind of potential this country has. But if we continue to play these shenanigans and these games and create cabals and coteries and all that, then forget about it. There are going to be sporadic good events. We might win a few medals. We might really, as a 1.3, now 1.4 plus billion population, we might just keep on having these great moments that we have won 5, 6, 7 medals. Maybe we go into double figures, 10, 12 medals. That will be the end of the story. We will never ever become a sporting country. So the problem is the government of the day. The problem is the ministry, which is completely, the officials of the ministry come up with such kind of obnoxious affidavits in courts, which only protect the powers that be in these national sports federations. They have never ever filed an affidavit which is actually pro athlete, or in the interest of the athlete or the interest of the particular sporting discipline. What do you do with such kind of people? Why can't, I mean, we have such a phenomenal prime minister, right? People love him. He has a 70-80% popularity rate. He says, I na khaunga na khane dunga, beti bachao beti padhao. I mean, these are the betis who are right there, right? And there are these khaunga khane kind of people on the other side whom your government is protecting. Why can't the prime minister just have a meal with these people? Invite them right today for a lunch or a dinner. Invite them. Have a dialogue with them. Not when they win medals. Right now. This is when they need you the most as the prime minister of the country. And call them. Have a dialogue. I'm sure whatever falls from the prime minister, he has so much of command today and so much of respect. They will in a second agree to whatever the prime minister will say. But where is that dialogue? Where is that communication? Where is that effort that I will not protect my own because the entire country is standing on the other side with these athletes? And it's only becoming more and more embarrassing for the authorities who are in control today to defend the indefensible. You can do it. You can have egg on your face. You can continue to do whatever you want to do. But eventually it will become completely indefensible in that sense. And it will be too late by then. It's better to intervene now. Take the higher moral ground. Be that great mediator that people perceive you to be. Globally, he has that kind of a respect with leaders of the countries and G8, G20 forums. People respect him. This is such a minuscule thing. One statement and everything will fall in place.
Nilanjan, considering all of the things that we've experienced in the past couple of months, where do you see this movement going forward?
The earlier it's sorted out, the better, because this is getting murkier day by day. What prevented, as Mr. Mehra very rightly said, what prevented a dialogue? Come on, you can sit in a room and have dialogues. The Prime Minister is at least the last level where you need to reach. Within the sporting federation, within the ministry, within all other stakeholders, couldn't everyone sit for a dialogue out there? What is preventing them? Is it the ego, or is it their, is it the temptation to be moving out from any controversy, or turning their head to what they feel is not a very very issue which needs to be addressed? The earlier this gets sorted out, it's better. How? Obviously through dialogue, and with the judiciary coming in. What it's also robbing the athletes is, this is the year of the Asian Games and other tournaments, the CWG. So these athletes are kind of ruining the mental framework of the athletes. We are ruining them, and India will only get poorer, because on the podium, when we want them, will wanting to see some of these athletes standing on the podium, and all of them have the capability of doing so, and they have been there. So their strength training, their training sessions, their recovery, The build up to each and every tournament with the right mental frame isn't happening. The earlier it gets out sorted, the better. Very rightly said, a dialogue, a dialogue. That's a simple dialogue. Dialogues all over the world, all over the ages have kind of sorted out so many problems.
Rahul, as you've said in the podcast, that there's no system. So going forward, where do you think the athletes will find justice? When will they find justice?
It's tough in our system. We do have the laws. Does it provide justice to people? It's a debate. It's a huge debate. So the process itself becomes a punishment. Look at what the wrestlers have to go through. Look at the process. Today, I was reading somewhere that Delhi police is cutting their connections for water, electricity, not allowing them to take food and water inside. I mean, where are we headed? Rather than having a plain, simple dialogue, we are actually confronting it. We are trying to make things far worse. We are taking positions from where it's going to be extremely difficult for anyone to budge. A state is a state. A state has a power, and a state is mighty. And the higher you go, the taller you become as a personality. More humble you should be. That's the hallmark of a great individual. That's what your legacy then is remembered for life. Look at Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Today also people say, what a great prime minister, what a great parliamentarian, right? Why? Across party lines, people have such great things to talk about him. That's your legacy. Leave that legacy. I would only suggest, I'm a very small person. I really don't know whether, I have the capacity to even say what I'm saying, but I don't mince my words, unfortunately. And therefore, I only want to request that, the way I see it headed is there will be disaster ahead. Players are not going to, unfortunately. I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm also a pragmatist. I'm an optimist because I'm fighting the system for last 22 years in courts. If I was a pessimist, I would be shutting my law books and say nothing can happen in this country, to hell with it. But I still see, those trickling effects happening. And it gives me great pleasure and delight when that happens. And that's what I live for. So therefore, I feel that it's possible. But the possibility will happen only when the courts intervene. If the court come Friday says nothing to do with it, your prayer was only limited to registration of a case, and we've got the case registered now, that's the end of the story. Pack your bags, go back home. That's going to be the end of the story, right? Nobody's going to follow it. Somewhere down the line, 3, 4 months, 6 months down the line, the police is going to file a cancellation report saying we couldn't find any evidence against this gentleman, and therefore he will be exonerated. Probably somewhere down the line, some statements will come that nothing of this sort ever happened. The victim might change under pressure the statement that no, something of this sort never happened, and we will be asked to completely forget this, and and there will be the same Brij Bhushan Sharan's probably son will take over the federation, or somebody else who's close to him in proximity will take over, and business as usual will carry on. So that's the grim side of it. What I want to see, I hope it happens, and I hope there is a light at the end of the tunnel out here in this wrestling protest, which is that there will be a time-bound investigation. There will be a court-monitored special investigation team, because Delhi police has lost its credibility completely in this case. They can't deliver justice at all. They won't be able to do a free and fair investigation. So you need to have fresh investigators into it who only report to the Supreme Court. Will Supreme Court allow it? I don't know. That's for everyone to see. Uh, Number two, so one is pertaining to the investigation. Number two, protect these victims. Get a 164 statement before a magistrate immediately recorded, so that versions don't change subsequently and can't be changed subsequently. Make sure that the person, if there's a heinous offense, because see, there are in the POXO Act, there is something called aggravated penetrative sexual assault, then there is sexual assault, then there is aggravated sexual assault. Under which provision of law, under which section have they really registered a case? We don't know. So depending on, because these vary from 3 years of minimum punishment to life imprisonment. Now, if it is a heinous offense which has been alleged, this person must be immediately arrested. In any case, the ministry must ensure that he demits office right now. I mean, it's already too late. He's already gone past your 12 years Forget about this incident. According to your sports code, he is violating your code. Ask him to step down. Simple. So this is not about whether you're guilty or you're innocent. It's about you're not following the law of the land. Simple. So ask him to step down. Then the entire mechanism of the complaints mechanism needs to be put in. This is, I think, a watershed moment for Indian sports, where for the first time I've seen that sports persons have come together. In this country, earlier British rule was there, where they phenomenally worked on the principle of divide and rule, and they were very successful. And currently, ever since we are independent, the politicians do exactly the same, divide and rule. And in this case, the politicians of the federations are doing exactly the same. So if a Dhoni will stand up, they will make a Dravid and a Sachin Tendulkar stand up on the other side. If Vinesh stands up and Punya stands up, they will make a PT Usha stand up on the other side. Thankfully, it didn't work, but that was the intention: divide and rule, make them look as if they're not together, they're not united, they're not one in it. So I would say put mechanisms, have athlete commissions everywhere, have ethics commissions everywhere, have criminal internal complaint societies everywhere, follow the rule of the law, follow the judgments of the Supreme Court, show, at least pretend that you are on the right side of law. You might be violating it blatantly, but at least those provisions should be there in the constitution. Right now we don't even have that basic material, that you have your rules and regulations according to the law of the land. Follow that, bring that in place, and then hopefully 6 months or a year down the line, there could be some justice meted out to these players. Otherwise, forget it. Powers that be and agencies will hound them. Their careers will be, in 1 year's time, you will see, if nothing comes out of this, each one of them will be, in a way challenged. They will not be selected on one pretext or the other. There will be issues on their discipline and various other issues which will be raked up by the federation, because these are petty people. They don't forget. They will come back, and they'll come back and hit you hard. Which is why whenever a sports person comes to me to take advice, I always take 3 sittings with them first, and I ask them, sleep over it, go back, come after a week, after they've heard me, after I've given them the entire account of what all can happen to them. And then if I see that a person is still wanting to go to court, despite all of that, what can happen to him by the system, then I take them to court. Because the system will come back, and the system is ruthless, and they will hit back. They will not take what Punyas and the Pogarts have done very kindly. They are forced to do it today. They will not, trust me, they will not in 6 months or a year down the line.
Um, let's just hope that justice is served, and also it's served in time. Thank you so much, Nilanjan and Rahul, for joining us today. Very grateful to both of you for your insights and for your valuable time.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.